What's up, everyone? Welcome to another NFL Deep Dive episode. Before we get into the Rams, I want to make sure you are not missing out on my Twitter giveaway of 98 overall Legends Tribute Michael Vick. Probably the best card in Madden Ultimate Team. You can get it for free. Just head to my Twitter at TFG_football. Give it a retweet. It's pinned up there on the front of my page. And all you got to do is retweet it. And since you're watching this, you're probably subscribed. And that's how you can win Michael Vick. So on to the Rams. It's a team that has a lot of pessimism. It's a team that's really been snowballing downhill ever since the move to LA. The reason I have them ahead of other teams that I've already covered, I think they have more upside. They get Sean McVay in there. Can he make the offense at least serviceable so that this defense can stay off the field a little more, stay fresh? Because it is still a pretty solid defensive unit. They definitely have some playmakers on that side of the ball. That said, this is probably still the worst run front office in football. They can't keep anyone in-house. They lose William Hayes and TJ McDonald. They have to overpay for Tavon Austin. They give him like $10 to $11 million, which is absurd in my opinion. And then they have to franchise Tremaine Johnson. He's making about $16 million on the franchise tag as a fringe top 30 corner. So they do have the talent to be a decent team, I would say. We've seen them really compete against good teams in the past, really dominating the line of scrimmage on defense. Could they put it all together and kind of save this thing and maybe make the playoffs? I wouldn't totally rule it out. This is the first team on this list that at least has a slim chance of getting into the tournament. But, boy, I would not be guessing that that's going to happen. I don't expect it to happen. I think this team has the worst trajectory of any team in the NFL. It really just has not had a break, cannot make the right draft pick. Just everything's going wrong for this team right now, and they're going to have to turn it around this year. Otherwise, they'll probably have to just blow everything up and start over. So now taking a look at the depth chart, starting with Jared Goff, the Hard Knocks laughing stock, just an absolute goon of a person on Hard Knocks. No one seemed to like his personality. And then he goes and wears his own jersey to a bar. Really just not helping himself out with that one. On the field, his tape is honestly impossible to evaluate. The offensive line was so bad. The play calling was so bad, and the receivers were pretty bad as well. Probably the worst surrounding core in football last year. It's going to be better this year with Sean McVay coming in. They at least get an offensive mastermind in there. You can question whether or not McVay is mature enough to be the head coach, but he can coach offense. There's no doubt about that. And Jared Goff, in terms of pedigree, higher than Kirk Cousins, who is mildly successful in Washington. So Jared Goff has a much better year than people expect. I don't think he's going to be great by any measure, but he's definitely going to be playing all 16 games for this team. Sean Mannion and Dylan Thompson are the backups here. A, those are not good backups, and B, they need to get a full season of evaluation on Jared Goff, and if this team is terrible this year, like first overall pick terrible, then I could absolutely see them moving on from Jared Goff. It wasn't this regime's pick. They inherited him, so would not be surprised if they moved on from Jared Goff, but also wouldn't be surprised if we saw some good things from Jared Goff and said, okay, they can build around him. Moving on to the running backs now, Todd Gurley, who I'm really going to hit on hard in the fantasy section. I will say I still love Todd Gurley, and I tweeted about his Madden rating, which is still hysterically low. He's an 82 overall in Madden. That's like the 20th running back in the game, and I still think he's a top 5 or 6 talent at the position. So just to recap that tweet, here's the guys that I highlighted, that are ranked ahead of Todd Gurley. Mark Ingram, Lamar Miller, LeGarrette Blount, Jonathan Stewart, Eddie Lacy, Giovanni Bernard, and Latavius Murray. Is anyone listening to this going to tell me that those guys are better running backs than Todd Gurley? I absolutely don't think so. This is why I do my roster, and I encourage you guys to go out and download it. But if you put Todd Gurley in any of those guys' positions, he's going to do way better, in my opinion. Anyway, moving on to the backup running backs here. I actually like Malcolm Brown. He looked really good in the preseason, and he's the clear-cut backup here. If anything's to happen to Todd Gurley, Malcolm Brown, I think, is going to get a serious opportunity and a serious look. And they didn't really address this position in the offseason at all. So they seem to be happy with Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown as the true running backs. They do sign Lance Dunbar. Can he stay healthy? If so, he is everything that Chris Thompson is, who was the Washington third down receiving back in the Sean McVay offense. So Lance Dunbar could definitely play a pretty decent role in this offense to the extent that Chris Thompson plays over there in Washington. And then you have Aaron Green, a former kind of a stud high school recruit out of TCU, hasn't really done anything since. Zach Lasky, kind of fullback type there, and then just some other undrafted guys. So running backs covered there. They do get Sam Rogers, the fullback out of Virginia Tech in the draft. Interesting player. Had some highlight plays at Virginia Tech as a fullback. And then moving on to the receivers, they signed Robert Woods to a huge deal. They have to pay him extra to get him to come home. USC guy. I actually like Robert Woods. I have kind of a short list of guys that sort of a watch list of sorts where if they went to a good spot, I think they could really blow up. Robert Woods was on that list, but I'm not going to say that this is a good spot or even an upgrade from Buffalo. So I think we'll see pretty similar things from Woods than we saw in Buffalo, but he will at least be the number one receiver here, so he'll probably get a few more targets. But we did see Robert Woods as the number one with a lot of Sammy Watkins injuries, so we kind of know what we're going to see from Robert Woods. Tavon Austin there is the kind of toy for this offense. That's really all he is. He's never going to turn into that deep threat, it doesn't seem. And then they have Cooper Kupp, who they took in the third round. Kind of buried on the depth chart right now, but I think we'll see him emerge as the number 2 for this team. Really reminds me of like Jordan Matthews and Eric Decker. Just a solid interior slot guy that is going to be able to have some deep touchdown upside as well. So I like Cooper Kupp in this offense. And then the rest of these receivers, they take Josh Reynolds in the 4th round. Intriguing prospect out of Texas A&M. Not sure we'll see much from him this year. And they do have Mike Thomas and Pharaoh Cooper, draft picks from last year. They'll probably get in and out in this offense. Bradley Marquez and Nelson Spruce on here as deep depth. We saw Nelson Spruce quite a lot in Hard Knocks last year. And then at tight end, Tyler Higbee listed as the number 1 guy right now. But Gerald Everett, I think, is going to be the guy. He was their first pick in this draft, the guy that they were targeting. He kind of fills that Jordan Reed pedigree to a T, honestly, as an athlete. A really good receiver. I wasn't a huge fan of him in college. I thought this was a little high. I thought he should have gone maybe 3rd or 4th round. But they really like him. He should be their guy. But Tyler Higbee also a 4th round pick from last year, another decent athlete, good receiving tight end. We'll probably see a little bit from both of these guys. And then Travis Wilson, the other tight end, listed on the depth. The offensive line, this is not a good group. The Andrew Whitworth signing is huge just to get somebody in there that knows what they're doing. They just traded Greg Robinson today, actually. It seems that Roger Saffold will be their starting left guard. From an outside perspective. John Sullivan, they signed to be their center just to kind of get another guy that knows what they're doing in there. They seem to be going the veteran route with this offensive line. And just hope that they can have a serviceable group knowing that they're not going to be dominant, but at least not be terrible. Cody Wickman, Andrew Donnell, the right guards listed. Rob Havenstein, it seems Jamon Brown is actually going to be their starting right tackle. A 3rd round pick from 2 years ago. Rob Havenstein has really not worked out, a 2nd round pick from that same draft. So a group that's going to have to click together, pretty much all new starters or guys that rotated in and out last year. I'm not optimistic about this group. The Andrew Whitworth signing is great. It'll definitely give Jared Goff a chance, but this is definitely going to be a liability for this team. And I also forgot to mention Corey Harkey and Tamarick Hemingway at tight end. just to fill that in there. Moving on to this defense now, it's a group that's actually switching to a 3-4 scheme. That means Aaron Donald's going to be playing 3-4 D end. I love this fit for him. It means he's going to be outside just a little more. And man, he is going to dominate in this role. He's going to be in the same role that J.J. Watt is in for the Texans defense, so I think we see a lot more sacks from Donald this season. Michael Brocker's moving into play, kind of that nose tackle role. We did see a lot of nickel defense last year, however, so it might be kind of a move lineman there for Michael Brockers. And Ethan Westbrook's playing defensive end. That'll be the starting group on the D-line. Then they have some depth. I don't love it. I mean, Dominique Easley's really good. I like him when he's on the field, but he seems to get injured quite a bit, although last season he did stay relatively healthy. Matt Longgrace played a decent amount last season, and then just a bunch of fillers at the back of the depth chart. Trinka Passat-Lewis, couldn't tell you anything about him. Mike Purcell coming over from San Francisco. Tyron Walker from Detroit. Those guys will probably get a few snaps on and off. And then they do take Tanzel Smart in the 6th round. An intriguing guy. Sleeper potential there on the D-line. And then now at linebacker, Robert Quinn gets to move and stand up, kind of show that athleticism even more. And Connor Barwin's going to have to play outside linebacker. A really good athlete. Getting up there in age, though, can he produce still as a stand-up linebacker? We'll see. I can't remember if when he was in Houston, if he played with his hand down or as an outside linebacker, but he is a phenomenal athlete, so I would think he'll be pretty productive, especially as sort of the third pass rusher among this group behind Donald and Robert Quinn. He's going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities. And at depth there for the edge rusher, really, really weak. I mean, Morgan Fox, Carlos Thompson, and they draft Samson Ebukam and Ejuan Price. This is probably a group that they're going to have to address in the future. Just not great depth there. We'll see if Ebukam can develop. And then at inside linebacker, you get Alec Ogletree, who I'm a huge fan of, just such a freak. I've got a highlight of him on my Twitter stuffing, I believe it was Mark Ingram on the goal line when I thought he was just going to roll over him, but Alec Ogletree, just an absolute wall at inside linebacker. And then Mark Barron, he's going to get kind of a new role as the inside linebacker here. Pretty similar. I mean, he's a cover linebacker, converted safety. And then at the depth, very weak. This was a very thin group of linebackers. They pretty much only started Mark Barron and Ogletree in the 4-3 scheme. But Bryce Hager, Josh Forrest, Corey Littleton, Reggie Northrup. Rams better hope that they don't get an injury there to Ogletree or Barron. Actually, Ogletree in general. I mean, Barron's not really a run stuffer, so if Ogletree ever got hurt, this group would be in a lot of trouble. Onto the corners, it's a decent group. Tremaine Johnson's fine. He's a fine number one. I would much rather have him as my number 2 corner in an ideal defense, but a lot of teams would love to have Tremaine Johnson as their best corner. EJ Gaines is a decent second corner. Probably not a long-term answer there, though. Nickel Roby Coleman playing as their nickel back, undersized stud. And then it seems that they're going to be moving LaMarcus Joyner to safety now. I mean, it'll probably be sort of that quote-unquote safety that we see from Tyrann Mathieu in Arizona. Probably a combo of them both there. And then Marquis Christian, Kayvon Webster, both free agents that they sign. Troy Hill played a decent amount last year. No draft picks going towards corner this year, so they seem pretty happy with that group. And then moving to safety, Mo Alexander, pretty good player. I'd like to see him develop even more this year with another year under his belt. And then Isaiah Johnson there as the strong safety, but LaMarcus Joyner again. It'll probably be mostly Mo Alexander and Joyner in the back of the secondary there. And Cody Davis. They do take John Johnson out of Boston College in the 3rd round. So that wraps up the look at the defense. We're going to get into some fantasy football now. There's not a ton of relevance here with this Rams offense, but there's some guys to talk about. Jared Goff, not ranked according to fantasy football draft calculator. When I say not ranked, I mean he's not in their rankings of drafted players, which they rank 24 quarterbacks, I believe. So 22 quarterbacks. So he's not ranked. I mean, you're going to definitely take him in a dynasty league. He's a former number one overall pick. A later round pick when you got 25 roster spots. You're going to take him, especially if it's two quarterbacks, which I'd encourage for dynasty. Todd Gurley at running back. So he's going as the 10th overall running back, 17th overall player. I think that's the right spot in terms of where he's going for running backs, but I do think it's a little early. I think there's a pretty big drop off between the 9th ranked running back in Jordan Howard and Todd Gurley. The guys right ahead of him are Jordan Howard, Jay Ajayi, and DeMarco Murray. And then at Todd Gurley at 10, you have Leonard Fournette, Marshawn Lynch, Lamar Miller. So I think that's the right spot. I think he should be ahead of that second group of guys that have much more questions to be answered. But that said, I talked about Isaiah Crowell going almost a whole round later. I would much rather take a stud receiver in the middle of the second and then take Isaiah Crowell at the end of the third, if that's kind of where you're sitting. I think Isaiah Crowell actually finishes higher than Todd Gurley this year. If I'm statting out Todd Gurley, I think he'll have about 1,100 rushing yards, which is going to put him somewhere between the productivity of his rookie year and where he is now. And then 8 touchdowns, I think, is reasonable for Gurley, and 33 catches for 250 yards. The catches are probably going to drop off for Gurley with Lance Dunbar coming in, but we did see him catch the ball a decent amount last season. And then I mentioned Malcolm Brown as the clear handcuff there. I mean, he's not really going to kill it by any means if something happened to Gurley, just because it's not a great offense. But starting running backs have value in the NFL. Todd Gurley does have some injury history, so just a guy to keep your eye on and be ready to snag Malcolm Brown, a guy that I don't think a lot of people are aware of. So be ready to snag Malcolm Brown if anything happened to Todd Gurley. If you're in a deeper dynasty league, I would consider grabbing Malcolm Brown. And then Lance Dunbar in any kind of PPR format, deeper leagues, 14, 16 teams, he should be taken later. Brown and Dunbar, by the way, not ranked on Fantasy Football Calculator. On to the receivers. None of these guys are ranked. Like I said, not a lot of fantasy relevance here. Robert Woods, I think we're going to see him climb up a little bit. I know the Fantasy Footballers just listed him as a sleeper. Personally, I think Cooper Kupp could end up being the number one receiver here by the end of the year. I like Woods, but he's not really dominant in any area. Cooper Kupp could at least emerge as a safety blanket for Goff, really solid hands and a really smart route runner. I think he's going to be the guy getting more open than Robert Woods, and a guy that Goff is going to look at quite a bit once they get on the same page together. And then at tight end, Gerald Everett not ranked. Neither is Higbee. Everett's the guy I would want in a deeper dynasty format. We do see a lot of production from Jordan Reed, obviously. Not saying that Everett is going to be as good as Jordan Reed by any means, but there's at least upside there with Everett, and when you're drafting a tight end, you're going to look for upside. So definitely going to look at him in a dynasty league, and even a deep league where maybe a 16-team league, I would take a shot at Gerald Everett at the end of the draft. So that wraps up the fantasy aspect there. So moving on to how the Vegas looks at these Rams. They're the first team that I'm talking about that is not 200 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. The Rams are at 150 to 1. I'm not taking them to win the Super Bowl, however. And then to win the division, they're actually 12 to 1, which is pretty high. Granted, if the Seahawks can't figure it out and they absolutely fall apart for some reason, it's really up for grabs. The Rams, the Cardinals, and the 49ers. I mean, the Seahawks are going to win this division. There's really not a reason to talk about that. I would not pick the Rams. I mean, if it's not the Seahawks, I feel like it's just going to be the Cardinals by default. So I'm not going to take the Rams. 12 to 1 seems too high. So moving on to the over-under, they are at 5.5. That's about right for me. I think they probably get to 5 if I had to guess. So I guess I'm going under, but that seems pretty spot on to me. So I'll probably stay away from that. So that's going to do it, everyone. Let me know what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong in terms of this series or anything else. Check out that Twitter giveaway, the Michael Vick 98 overall, best player in Ultimate Team, at TFG_football. So deuces, everyone. We'll see you for the next one.